Despite the Second Amendment decision by the United States Supreme Court in NYC versus Bruin, some places in America haven't got the message. One of those places appears to be New York City, where Mayor Eric Adams seems to think that he controls gun laws in America. Crazy story involving a request by a clergyman to allow guns in churches in New York City and Mayor Adams' refusal to do so. Stay tuned and get the details. Hey folks, I'm Mark Smith, host of the Four Boxes Diner, proud American gun owner, constitutional attorney, and best-selling author. If you haven't subscribed to the Four Boxes Diner Second Amendment channel, please do so and show your love for the right to keep and bear arms. Crazy story out of New York City. A few weeks ago, a prominent reverend, religious leader, by the name of Bishop Lamar Miller Whitehead, was robbed during a live stream on a Sunday morning when he was in front of his congregation. Now, this robbery, which I'll put links to the stories about this down below, actually took place again on Sunday morning during services. And apparently, according to the reports, up to $400,000 in jewelry and other valuables were stolen during this robbery. Now, what's interesting about this is that after the robbery, Bishop Miller Whitehead came out and said that clergymen such as himself and others should be allowed to carry guns to protect themselves during church services as well as their congregants. Now, I should mention, according to some of the reports, Bishop Miller Whitehead himself may have some sort of a criminal record that might preclude him from possessing firearms. I don't know, but there seems to be some reports about that. But that's not the purpose of this video, to get into any of those details. What's interesting is that Bishop Miller Whitehead asked and said there should be a law that allows clergymen to carry guns. And of course, the answer is there is a law. It's called the Second Amendment. That's how disconnected places like New York City still are, despite the existence of the Second Amendment and the New York NYC versus Bruin Supreme Court case. They still think you have to go mother may I. So he actually asked that a law be enacted to allow clergymen to carry guns, not realizing that the Supreme Court just said that all law-abiding responsible Americans are allowed to carry guns, including in New York City and New York State. And what's equally amusing in a certain respect is that Mayor Eric Adams, who, by the way, is a former New York police officer, and that's relevant because he, on the campaign trail, was allowed to carry his own firearm because he was former police, former NYPD, so he had the right to carry a gun, one of the few in New York City. And he mentioned that during press conferences and whatnot. But set that aside, what's interesting that Mayor Adams, when asked about the request that clergymen be allowed to carry guns, he immediately says no. And I'm thinking, dude, you don't have a say anymore, because the Second Amendment says that people have the right to carry guns as articulated by the U.S. Supreme Court in the Bruin decision. Now, in fairness, after the Bruin decision came down, the state of New York passed a series of laws that did, among other things, passed what are called sensitive place laws, which you know from this channel many months ago, because I warned you about this. When you hear the phrase sensitive places, that is a euphemism for gun-free zones. Well, New York State passed all these gun-free zones, and one of them, quite clearly, as they see it, are churches, religious institutions. You can't bring a gun onto those places. Those are sensitive places, gun-free zones. But of course, the U.S. Supreme Court knew that New York would act in bad faith. So the Supreme Court actually preempted this kind of an argument in their decision in Bruin. And what did the Supreme Court say? They said that, yeah, you can make certain things sensitive places, gun-free zones, but it has to be narrowly tailored, very limited. And the four examples the Supreme Court gave are all involve government functions. And those four places, as you recall from other videos, are you might be able to legally, according to the Supreme Court, declare a gun-free zone as a courthouse. You might be able to do it to a legislative chamber, for example, Congress. You might be able to do it at a polling place where there's voting, and you might be able to do it at schools, which basically I'm interpreting, I think, as public schools and not private schools. Needless to say, none of those four categories of government functions have anything to do with private churches or private religious institutions. So I think it's highly unlikely that a court, if there's a legal challenge, and I'm sure there will be, to New York's banning of guns on church property, that's going to withstand that's going to stand up to judicial scrutiny. Beyond that, as you know, also from this channel, because you learn your history and you're the smartest people in the room, that at the time of our founding, not only were people allowed to bring guns to church during our founding, but 5 states actually required you to bring firearms to church to protect yourself, your family, and the congregants. Those 5 states included, and I'll put links down below to this, the states or Commonwealth of Virginia, Georgia, South Carolina, Rhode Island, and Connecticut. Those 5 states required you, during the founding era, to bring guns to church. So that's as important because the Supreme Court says that any kind of a gun control law, if to sustain it, the government bears the burden. Again, the government bears the burden. It's on the government to prove. The government bears the burden that there is a historical analogy or a historically analogous law to the gun control legislation that they're trying to uphold. So therefore, the government will have to show in New York that there is some historical evidence that at the time of our founding, churches were gun-free zone sensitive places. And that, in my view, is going to be impossible to show because, again, not only were people allowed to bring guns to church, in at least 5 states, they were actually required to bring guns to church. So to conclude, this colloquy, this discussion between Mayor Eric Adams saying, I would never allow people to carry guns in church, and the request by the alleged robbery victim, Bishop Miller Whitehead, this discussion or back and forth between them about allowing clergymen to carry guns in New York City in churches, seems to be completely beside the point. It's like, what planet are these people living on? It's like they don't even know the Second Amendment exists and that the Bruin decision came down, or at least they're pretending not to know in the case of Mayor Adams. But we'll see what happens. I will keep you informed because I'm sure there'll be legal challenges to the church ban of firearms in the state of New York. And I'm pretty confident, in my view, that the plaintiffs challenging those bans of guns on church property are probably going to wind up on the losing end of that lawsuit whenever that lawsuit is filed. Okay, I hope you learned a little bit something here today at the 4 Boxes Diner. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. And again, we'll see you soon here at the 4 Boxes Diner.
Orders up. Table 2A.